court decision, there was the CIA came forward and said that it would pose a grave risk to national security if these tapes were to be released. We're supposed to forget that John Doe number 2 ever existed. Is the greatest manhunt in history.
That's right. The government said national security. Just like when the Sinaloa cartel said, we ship drugs in for America, you ship us guns, the government came in and said, it's true, national security.
Another very peculiar aspect on this, the research was, there are agencies, Alex, that we never knew even existed out of Washington and Langley, Virginia, that are popping up on the FOIA request, that we know that they showed up at the crime scene that morning. And it's like, wow, where did this agency come from? Where did these people come from? If it was a lone nut driving an ANFO-laden truck bomb in front of a building, why do you have some of the top 14 agencies, some of them that we never knew existed, show up in Oklahoma City?
Why was the head of the FBI anti-terrorism group lying saying he wasn't there, and it turns out he was?
It's amazing. Lies after lies after lies. So this film, we know that we really are clarifying a lot of those concerns and bringing out information nobody's ever seen before.
And like you were saying earlier, you got Mark Penn, who is head of a PR firm that specializes in public relations for, genocidal third world dictators, saying that the only thing that's going to save the Obama administration is another Oklahoma City bombing. They're ramping up for it now. I think we're overdue for another false flag. And so getting the word out, going to the Infowars store, buying the DVD, spreading this information, this could actually save lives, I think. And I
know you guys spent 3 or 4 years getting this done.
Yeah, it was, years of research, almost 16 years of research that we incorporated into the movie. But yes, it was over a year and a half in production because we wanted to have that.
Yeah, because I remember Chris talking to me about this like 2 years ago. All right, guys, it's available at Infowars.com, A Noble Lie, Oklahoma City, 95. Everybody get it. And let's go ahead and get you guys set up for next week. We need to talk about some of the other witnesses you want to bring in for next week's interview. Amazing. Bob Chapman straight ahead. A ton of news. Stay with us. Okay, we're back, and the editor of the internationalforecaster.com and frequent Guest Friday analyst, Bob Chapman, is with us for the next 40 minutes until this Friday edition ends. I'll be back, of course, live this Sunday, 4 to 6 p.m. Central. Hope that you will join us for that. I've gotten to a lot of the news that's taking place, but I wanted to, before we get into the economics with Bob, where he's really the expert fighting the globals for 50-plus years, I wanted to ask Bob, the NDAA passes. Obama says he wants to kill it secretly. He's the one that wanted it all along. That's now gone public. And then on top of that, we have the open announcement now. Okay, the government does want to selectively shut down any free speech they want. Okay, we may start taking pension funds. Okay, we're going to use drones on you. It's even moving faster than I thought, Bob. They must know that they're getting ready to really collapse things. Have you ever seen anything move this quick? And what's your view on all the movement we're seeing? They're really trying to batten down the hatches on the American people. And the same stuff's happening in Europe. Same thing's happening in Asia. This is the big one. Are they getting ready for World War III? What's happening?
Well, I think it could be a succession of wars as well as a World War III. And I think they'd open up with smaller actions and graduate into larger ones. As far as the president signing this piece of legislation, of course. The reference you made to it happening all over the world, the expeditious process, you're right about that. You've got you got a number of major elections coming up. The first real important one that I'm able to cite here is in France in May and June. And I don't know if you discussed this in the program or not. There's three parties. The Center Party, which is in office, Mr.
Sarkozy.
Sometimes I get that name mixed up. And then you have the candidate from the Socialists, which happens to be pretty far to the left. And then you have Marine Le Pen. And she is getting polled at around 21% right now. And I think she'll build up to a 26 before the election and be one of the two parties that'll run in June. Now, what's significant about her is that she's already said, look, what we're going to do here is get out of the euro, we're going to get out of the European Union, and we're going to get rid of all these illegal aliens. And she's got a big shot at it. And if she becomes the president of France or PM, whichever it is, that's going to throw a bombshell into what's going on in Europe. The bankers hate her. The bankers hated her father even more. And I must tell you that the Le Pen family is a very good friend of mine and friends of mine, and I have to tell you that I'm a little prejudiced.
Well, certainly they get demonized for a reason because they're nationalistic and the globalists don't like that, kind of like Margaret Thatcher was. What is going on in Europe? I mean, obviously they're saying the banks are taking over, but in fact, I wanted to ask you about this. Cameron comes out and says vetoes Euro expansion when he's always tried to block the British people from being able to have a vote to get out of the Euro, which they never voted to enter. What's really happening there?
Well, I'm so glad you brought this up because, number one, I don't know which way they're going on it, but I'm going to give you two versions. You see the current version. The excuse is that the other members of the Eurozone wanted to put a 1% tax on transactions in the City of London. I deplore them, but that's not the point. That's unfair. And that's going to run 15 or 20% of volume. That means business would move over to Frankfurt. Now, she might just as well as punch Mr. Cameron in the nose or the British people in the nose is to put something up like that. So I think there's another reason here. And I think the reason could very well be 65% of the Germans don't want to be in the Euro or in the Eurozone. The situation with the debt in the 6 countries that are virtually bankrupt, they don't want to continue to support these people. Since the inception of the Euro, 66% of men and 71% of women, and that's some years ago, did not want it at that time.
All right, well, stay there. We got to go to break, Bob. Let's talk about why this is so important, because this is the attempt to set up world government through the European Union, as we knew they would always do. And if they're not able to get this done, this could really be a crippling blow to the globalists. Stay with us.
We're on the march.
That's what I tell myself every time I want to interrupt somebody, because I got this point I want to make, and I'm like a little dog barking. But that's also an attribute that I'm upset by things, that I'm irritated by the public being conned and losing basic freedoms, and then I have an instinct and a drive to want to warn people. And you should have that too. And obviously most of you who are listeners have that same drive, and that's why you're here. But now, more importantly than ever, we're not tooting our horn. We're not confidently, myself included, producing newscasts and documents that illustrate to others how right we've been. Now there is a world government. Now it's not denied. Now it's a police state coming out to the people. It's a collectivist model based on phony environmentalism as a pretext to selectively, financially destroy people. It's here. We were right. We warned the people. The globalists stalled the public while trying to get this in place. Now they're imploding Europe. In fact, I have a article here I wanted to raise to Bob. It's out of Time Magazine. Out of chaos order. IMF seeks collective world bailout of Europe. And they go on to say how great it is and that we're going to bail out the Europeans. When it's not Europeans, it's the mega banks who are getting the bailout and who engineered the fraud. And they count on the public being ignorant about this and just, oh, we're going to raise your taxes to save Europe, those lazy Europeans. And so you were bringing up the point that, yeah, I mean, the polls are 70, 80, in some cases even higher, against the euro. Most countries weren't allowed to vote to be in it or out of it. And now you've got England and other European blocs jockeying for who gets the big position in it. So where do you see it going? I mean, obviously, time is not on their side, as we said a year ago when Brzezinski started warning the elite, hey, we're in trouble. Because once you look past the puppet Obama, the puppet Merkel, Sarkozy, Cameron, and you look to the banker, money manipulator, money changer, once you're aware of that fraud, then how do they ever get themselves out of it? Okay, start shutting down the web. Start arresting people. I mean, you think that's really going to work? It never works long term. And because we got the jump on them, Bob, historically, I mean, they are in the news today going, well, I guess they're going to shut down free speech. I guess it's what's needed. I guess the Pentagon really is going to do all this. I mean, you've got the top 80 inventors of the internet going public saying America is falling to an authoritarian system. This is a worldwide treaty. A new dark age is upon us. Everyone's starting to sound like Alex Jones. I have so many guests on who years ago would go, Alex, you go a little far, like Lord Monckton or Sheriff Mack or anybody. They're like, no, you were exactly right. You were right. How did you know this? Because I studied history in their own documents. Now, Bob, you saw this long ago, before I was born, and you were always seen as hardcore because you would break it all down. But this is like two runaway trains going right towards each other. So where do you see Europe going? What do you see happening?
Well, the facts that I was bringing out was the history of the German people and their reaction to the beginnings of the Euro and then the European Union, and then that they were forced into absorbing Eastern Germany, which was a disaster area, and then they had to go 1-for-1 on the currency. It should have been 30-50 to 1. Now, with that said, they're sick and tired of paying the price. They want out. And I think there's tremendous pressure within Germany, and that's why I'm considering that whole thing with England was a setup, because just on the face of it, to ask them to pay this tax and nobody else is ridiculous. So I think Germany wants out of the euro and out of the European Union.
And so they're going to let it, and I agree with you, and because their politicians are all losing and being kicked out. And so even though they're globalists, they understand it's political suicide. That's why they want the open tyranny. You had said a couple of weeks ago that you thought MF Global was a shell corporation they'd set up and that the loss was actually upping the ante for the other bet they'd made that was a win that was a transfer. And now that's what Zero Hedge, that's heavily connected. They're a bunch of super successful brokers in New York that run that under the nom de guerre, nom de plume, Tyler Durgan. And they're saying that that's probably what's going on from some of the information they have. But how do you square that then with Corzine? And I don't think Max Kaiser makes stuff up. Kaiser does have a lot of big connections. He says that the head of J.P. Morgan, which was reported by Bloomberg and others, that's where the money went. Now they say they don't know where it went, like the feds don't know where it went. I mean, who buys that a month and a half in or even 24 hours in? This is ridiculous. I mean, they know where you money transfer. They know what's in your bank account. They know who you pay. I mean, it's a joke. But Kaiser's saying that the head of Goldman Sachs said, I'm going to have you killed if you don't loot those accounts and give us that money that you lost speculating. So what do you make of all this? Or would they order him to make that bet and transfer and then still say, we don't care, give us money on top of it? Because we know Goldman Sachs is the Darth Vader enforcer for Emperor Palpatine, Goldman Sachs. Goldman Sachs is the enforcer to Emperor Palpatine, J.P. Morgan Chase. Well, I think either versions are fine. And I think Max has probably got good information. And I think one of the things that people should notice here that I think has been misconstrued, and that is presently and in the past, you could have hypothecation and rehypothecation, but only in a margin account, no matter where it was. And it's perfectly legitimate and normal operating procedure. A lot of people don't know about that because they don't read their contracts. They can't do that in a cash account unless they will just rush into some company and steal everybody's stock. And then they have the United States government all over them because the big money is made in those markets. Commodity markets are less than 1% of the action. The bond market's 100 times bigger than the stock market. So the stock and bond market is where they make their money. They're not going to try to shut that thing down unless it's... So is this a backhanded attack against gold speculation, as we've seen the last year, raising margin calls? Is this an attack against farmers and others hedging their bets on crops and people making money in